everyone, I'm Lauren. It's time to talk about what I read in March. I'll put stats and stuff on the screen as I talk, but I think I read 16 books in March. I think half of those were manga/graphic novels, and then the other half were regular novels. I think there was quite a bit of fantasy, but I think there's also a few other genres like mystery or horror. I don't know what I'm gonna label those particular books as, but there's also some historical fiction and contemporary, technically. So there's a little bit of a range, unlike some other reading months for me. It was almost all 4 and 5 stars. Only 1 star, 1 2 star, and 1 3 star. So I think that's pretty good. Could be better because the 1 star is the first 1 star read of the year. But, it was going to happen eventually. Hopefully that's all the stats and stuff. Let's just get into the books, starting with my 1 star read. So, before I get into it, I just want to say, I wouldn't say my opinion on this book is necessarily unpopular. It's a very, you either love it or hate it sort of book. But it is a classic, so I'm sorry if it's one of your favorite classics. I really didn't like it. And that was Lord of the Flies by William Golding. I'm sure a lot of people have read this, probably for school, but if you haven't, I'm not gonna go into spoilers for that, just in case. I know it's an old book, I don't care. You can't possibly have read every single book ever, so I'm not gonna spoil it. But essentially this is a book about a bunch of boys who crash into a deserted island. I think this is set around World War II or during World War II, and they're on this deserted island and they have to band together to survive on the island, and things do not go very well for them. And it's not a particularly long book, so much more specifics. It gets into spoilers. I will say that there is definitely a message in this book that the author really wants you to know and will shove it down your face. And that kind of gets into why I really did not like the book. Since the author has this message that he wants to say, I feel like he uses the characters as stepping stones to make his point true, or to prove his point. And in doing so, he kind of makes them not feel like actual people, at least to me. They're just representations of some concepts, and this is supposed to prove his point. I feel like if they were more realistic, they had more character to them, that would help his point more. But to me, it's just like, they're not real people. They're fake. They're just walking, talking symbolism, basically. And I thought that was really irritating, and I didn't like that. The other big thing that I didn't like about this is that it was really, really slow. It takes a long time for the big bang thing to happen. And I just feel like a lot of it didn't really need to be in there. It could have caught it a lot, and it's already a short book. But it's just so boring until kind of near the end, and then it gets a little bit more exciting, I guess. But just because you have an exciting ending doesn't make the rest of the book any less good. I get the point that the author is trying to make. I don't agree with him at all. And, I honestly am not really sure why this book is taught in schools a little bit, almost. But I am not an academic, really, so I'm not really the best to judge that kind of thing anyway. So yeah, that's why I gave it a 1 star. Just keep in mind as well that with my star ratings, I take no consideration to how a book affected other books or a society or whatever. I don't care about that. I don't care about its impact on anything. I only care about my enjoyment or how engrossed I was, or that kind of thing. It's only about my feelings about the book. Otherwise, then I would maybe consider other things and then give it a higher rating. But I hated it. I really did not enjoy it. Only reason why I didn't DNF it was because I read it for Murphy's Patreon buddy reads, and it was so short anyway, so I thought I'd finish it and then hate on it with everybody else. Well, not everybody hated it, but there's quite a few people that did, and quite a few people that didn't, so it was interesting to talk about how much I hated it, I guess. Moving on to the 2-star reads, or I guess 2-star read singular. Higurashi, Demon Exposing Arc by Ryukishi07. Higurashi is a very long manga series based off of a visual novel. It's a horror/mystery series that centers around a small town in the middle of nowhere. People start dying and people are looking for who murdered them, or if it's like a disease, and some other people think it's this god's curse. And it's really difficult to go into it without spoiling the whole thing, but it is a very intriguing series, and I have really enjoyed reading most of the volumes. This one, Demon Exposing Arc, is a little bit different. It is a side story to the main Higurashi volumes, and it stars a different character. Her family used to live in that area and moved to the big city, and that's a big no-no for the god Oyashiro. I don't remember. She's trying to get used to her new school and her new life, but then tragedy happens in the hometown that they moved from, and people in their area that came from the village starting to go kind of crazy and kooky. And yeah, woo, mystery horror shenanigans. This is meant as a standalone side story to the main series, and that is kind of partially why I did not like this so much. This is advertised as you don't need to read the main Higurashi series to enjoy this. You can read this first if you want to, and I probably agree with that. But the problem with that is that since I've already read all of those, they have to spend like half of the volume going over a bunch of the intricacies of the curse and what it does to people and all that stuff. But I already know all that, and that's not very interesting. And the other thing is that since all of these characters are new, and this is the only volume for this, you don't get to know these characters very well. They're all pretty simple too, so there's just nothing. The original stuff that is here is not very interesting either. I don't know if I'd say it's not executed well. It's just, stuff starts happening and I'm like, neat, and then the conclusion happens. I'm like, okay, neat, I guess. Doesn't really interest me though. And yeah, just overall not very interesting. Honestly, I'd recommend just skipping this unless you really aren't sure if you might like the Higurashi series, then maybe it might be okay. I definitely suggest not bothering with it though if you have read the other Higurashi volumes, because I don't think it's really worth your time. Then, to my singular 3-star read, The Great Hunt by Robert Jordan, which is the second book in the Wheel of Time series. If you haven't heard of the Wheel of Time, grand adventure, gathering lots of party members, going all over to different places. There's lots of not quite political, but almost political back stuff, and it's a really complicated series because, it's 14 bloody books, and I'm trying to make my way through the series as part of my 2020 goals. I think it was fine, hence the 3-star read. Obviously, I can't explain too much about this one, because it's a sequel, but my problem with it is the party does a lot of running around trying to find something. They get to one point and hang out there for a little bit, but then they have to go off and run around to do another thing, and they stop around for a little bit and run around to do another thing. And the whole time I was kind of thinking Yankee Sax, or whatever the actual name of that track is. There were a few parts in here with Nynaeve and Egwene, and they have their own sections in here that are a lot more interesting than the main plot. They're kind of separate from the main trio, Rand, Matt, and Perrin. Perrin? I don't know. There's only a few chapters of that, and it only starts around the mid to the end of the book, and so I just wanted more of that and less of them finding stuff. As well, one of my favorite characters, Moraine, had like 2 chapters or something, and one of them was like, "Woo, I'm hiding away and doing vague, mysterious stuff. Woo." I'm like, cool, thanks, Moraine. Just my complaints of this, I did enjoy slowly going through this. I mean, like, I like the writing, but it was definitely slow. I'm excited to continue on to the main series, but I was a little bit disappointed with this one. I did give the first volume a 4 stars, so my rating has dropped a little bit, but hopefully I like some of the other volumes a little bit more. Okay, from here on out, it's only 4 and 5 stars. A bulk of these are 4, so let's get into the 4 stars. Yay! First one is Rogue Protocol by Martha Wells. I may have said in my April TBR I was going to read this for April, but I mixed that up, I think. I'll have to double check the footage, but I actually meant Exit Strategy for April, and I read this in March. I don't know why I thought whatever. Rogue Protocol. I read this, and it was really good. It is the 3rd book in the Murderbot series. I didn't like this as much as the 2nd one, Artificial Condition, I think. Murderbot's just trying to do his usual Murderbot things. He's trying to find a way to watch his media in peace and stuff, and he's continuing to travel around and do that, and he kind of gets caught up in with this investigative team, and he tries to help them not be dumb and get killed, kind of, as well, as per usual for a Murderbot. I mean, yeah, there's not really much else for me to explain. It's Murderbot, it's really good. Murderbot is still good, just didn't like it as much as Artificial Condition, which I think I gave a 5 star, but I mean, 4 is still really good, and this is still pretty good. I can't wait to read more Murderbot. Next 4-star read is Kizumonogatari by Nishiyoshi. I always have trouble explaining this series. It's kind of a urban fantasy in Japan. There's a lot of these aberrations that mess with people. In this case, it's mostly this vampire called Kissshot. Her full name is Kissshot Acceleration Heart Underblade. That might give you a bit of an idea how kind of weird this series kind of gets. Kizumonogatari is the 4th book in the Monogatari series, or you can read this first because it is a prequel to the first 3 books, the Bakemonogatari books. And this goes into detail on how the main character got turned into like a half vampire thing. This one is a little bit different than the Bake books, and the Bake books are more very chatty, weird humor, like weird wordplay type humor, and the main character is trying to solve their issues with aberrations that kind of latched onto them. This one is a much more action-packed one. He has to fight other vampires to help Kissshot, and so he's fighting more, whereas there's not really that much fighting and action in the Bake books. It's definitely not something I can recommend to most people, really. You have to really like weird anime shenanigans, really. The main character's a little bit pervy, is one of the big things that would turn someone off here. Like, there's a full 3 pages of him describing how he accidentally saw some girl's underwear. If that kind of thing bothers you, then yeah, definitely, I don't think it would be a good idea to read this series, but I don't mind too much. Just the humor is kind of strange, and it's also kind of deep at the same time. I wish I knew how to describe the series because I always have a hard time, but I wanted to read this as part of my series goal. I don't know what else to talk about. It I enjoyed it. Next book I have to talk about is a little bit different than some of the other March reads, and that is Hatchet by Gary Paulson. This is a contemporary, I guess it's a contemporary, where the main character, he's off to see his dad, who lives kind of off in the Canadian wilderness, and he's taking a small plane over to see him, and the pilot gets a heart attack in the middle of the plane ride, and the main character crashes down in the middle of nowhere with not much other than a hatchet that his mom gave him, and he has to survive until somebody comes to rescue him. He slowly learns what he needs to do to survive, how harsh it is just out in the middle of nowhere. He has encounters with wildlife and just the environment being the butt. And yeah, I mean, it's a pretty simple book. It's like a middle grade YA. And I remember really liking reading this in school. So I wanted to give it a shot and see if I like this. And if I wanted to continue with the other, I think there are 3 other books in this series. And I really liked it, actually. It was just kind of interesting seeing him progress from barely being able to get any sort of food to like having a working system on having a fire going and getting food and a nice shelter and all that stuff. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. I don't know how the sequels are, but they seem to be pretty highly rated, so I'm probably going to give them a shot at some point. I don't know anytime soon or not, because I have a lot on my plate for this year, but I'm definitely looking forward to the other ones. Next 4-star is Equal Rights by Terry Pratchett. This is the 3rd book in the Discworld series. This one follows a kid and her grandmother. Weatherwax, I think, is the grandmother's name. The girl is to be the first female wizard, because normally women are witches and men are wizards, and you don't mix this up. The grandmother decides that she has to take the girl off to the Wizard Academy University, because grandmother is a witch and she doesn't know how to help her out with wizarding powers. That's totally outside of her wheelhouse. And they get into lots of different shenanigans, and it's very silly. I love the 2 main characters, and especially Weatherwax, who's just kind of no nonsense. And yeah, I really like this. I didn't like the first 2 books as much because I think they were a little bit rough and the jokes didn't land as well. But here in Equal Rights, I think it's still a little bit rough sometimes. There were some points where the story was a little bit confusing, but the jokes landed a lot more than in the first 2, and so I enjoyed it way more. This is another series I wanted to read more of for my series goal, and so next month I am going to be reading Mort, and I'm really excited for that because Death is the best character in Discworld, that, or at least so far, that I've encountered, so I'm looking forward to that as well. Next up, we have The Shadow of What Was Lost by James Islington. This is kind of a hard one to explain. It's kind of a big epic fantasy, and there's all these different powers, but some of them, the augurs, have OP mega powers, and they are shunned and nobody likes them. They don't tell much in the synopsis, so I don't really know what's considered a spoiler or not. But these characters have to go on this adventure to figure out what these weird artifact thing does. And the main character finds out he's an augur, so he has to go off and learn how to be one without being murdered. It's a very slow fantasy book, and there's a lot of little bits that happen that kind of come up later in the book and will probably come up in later books as well. This is the kind of book where the author does not want to answer any of your questions until the last possible moment kind of thing as well. So it's kind of hard to get into deep detail because there's like not a whole lot to go off of in the first bit. It's like the characters being in school and haha, adventure time. I liked them just going through the world, I guess. The world was a bit interesting, and I did like the characters that were in here. The plot was, like, a little bit hard to follow for me sometimes, because, like I said, the author doesn't really like to tell you anything. But I think overall I enjoyed my ride with it. I just wish I knew how to explain it better. Hopefully people on Goodreads are better at explaining it, because I certainly can't. I also read this for Murphy's other Patreon buddy reads. There was some mixed reception about this on there, and I can kind of see why. But I'm definitely on the side of pretty well enjoying this, and I am looking forward to the other 2 books in the series. Next one is another kind of really different wheelhouse of genres for me, and that is Humble Pie, a comedy of math errors by Matt Parker. This is a nonfiction book where the author goes into various things that have happened across time where something really bad happened because of a math mistake of some sort. They can be rounding errors, conversion errors. I don't remember all the different kinds of errors that they had. Basically, making mistakes with math can really have some serious consequences in the real world, is the moral of the story. Some of them are more kind of funny, because, like, oops, they made a mistake. And some of them are more like, people died in this situation because they estimated this thing wrong, or people almost died because of a conversion mistake and that kind of thing. And I think the author goes over these stories pretty well. I think you might have a little bit trouble understanding some of them if you are really not very good with math, or you don't have a math mind. I think he goes over it pretty well for maybe most people, but it's kind of hard for me to say exactly because I do have a computer science degree, so we've had to do a lot of math and computer science stuff, and a lot of these things do relate to computers as well. And a lot of the stories were very interesting, actually, and I hadn't heard of most of them, so I think for me, I really enjoyed that. There were a few bits that I didn't really understand that well that related to stocks, mostly, because I don't know stock market. It's confusing as all heck to me. And the other thing that I was a little bit not a big fan of was the section on random numbers was not particularly interesting for me, because a lot of it explains how computers make random numbers, and some parts in there were definitely interesting, but the parts on pseudo-random numbers was basically stuff that I've learned in class, so it was not that new to me, and I kind of sped through that part a little bit. But for the most part, I think the author explains things pretty well. He has a good humor to how he says things without being overly jokey, I guess, and so I thought it was pretty good. I'm now getting into the one graphic novel I read in March, and that is Shadow of the Batgirl by Sarah Kuhn. Kuhn? I wish I knew how to pronounce names. This might be a little bit hard for me to explain because this is a one-shot type of graphic novel, but it's about this girl who used to be part of this criminal organization but breaks out of that and kind of slowly learns how to be a proper person again, kind of thing, and break out of that and become Batgirl, I guess. And it's pretty sweet. I'm not used to reading superhero type comics. I mean, I do occasionally, but they're usually pretty mild superhero ones. And I think this is not a huge superhero comic. Like, she's not doing too much saving the day type thing. It's more her the main character trying to improve herself and get used to real life, I guess. And it was just really sweet. It was really well drawn, and I really do like the characters in this. There's a lot of diversity too. Everything was really sweet about it, I guess. But also sad seeing what the main character went through, I guess, a little bit. But overall, it's pretty just a good time. I read this because I always forget her booktube named Bibliofilth, maybe. She read this and really loved it, so I picked it up because it was on Hoopla, so it was free. No strings attached there, so yay. And I don't regret picking it up for sure. So thank you for the recommendation. Yeah. The last 4-star read I have is one of the mangas that I read, and that was Karumori Anything and Something by Karumori, as you might expect. This is a manga that is a collection of various manga that the mangaka has done in a bunch of magazines, and it's just collected into one volume, along with some other extra illustrations. I really love Karumori's work. I've read everything that's out in English as of now. She has a really intricate drawing style, and she just tells stories really well, I think. She has really interesting characters, and this one there's no exception with that as well. There were a few stories in here that weren't that interesting. Like, there was one that was kind of confusing, and Mori explained that someone else wrote the story, and she just drew it, so I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. That didn't feel quite like her own story. And then there was one where it was just about looking at girls' butts when they were hiking, and I was kind of confused about that. But for the most part, the stories were interesting. Some of them are more funny, comedic, some of them are more slower and thoughtful, and just, they were all well drawn. Even some of her earlier ones I still like the look of. And yeah, it was also interesting to read about the other illustrations that she worked on and what they were for and what she thought about them. This marked the last thing that I have to read from her. I will be talking about some of her other manga later in this video, spoiler alert. But this is the last thing that I had to read from her, and I'm very sad about that, because I'll have to wait, I think, till August for another volume of her manga, and then I'll have to wait another year again, probably. So this is also the only thing of hers that I can't really justify right now owning physically, because it is like, I think it's $100 or something for a copy. So, nah, I don't think so right now. So I just bought a digital version of this. Down to my 5-star reads. This is, I technically have like 5-star reads, I think. The first 5-star read I want to talk about is Higurashi, Dice Killing Arc by Ryukishi07. This is illustrated by Karin Suzuragi. This is the final volume in the main Higurashi series. I've already told you about what the Higurashi series is about, so I won't go into that again. But this is a epilogue of sorts to the main series. All the stuff has been solved in the volume before this. This is just after that, and there's this little adventure of sorts that this character, Rika, goes through, and she has to try and figure out and solve. I can't go into too much detail with this without majorly spoiling Higurashi, so I won't. But this is almost like a side story and not really needed overall in the main manga series, but I still really enjoyed it. This is a little bit less horror than some of the other volumes and more of a mystery-esque thing in what she's dealing with. But I really enjoyed it. She goes through a lot, and it kind of explores a little bit more into Rika that you don't get as much in the main series because it's focused on the main plot and the main thing of people getting killed. I do recommend reading this if you enjoyed all the other volumes of Higurashi. This is a really interesting horror mystery type series and is definitely crazy ride, that's for sure. I read this as part of my 2020 series goals, and now I have finished Higurashi. So yeah, I can check that off my list. The last 5-star reads I want to talk about, I'm going to talk about all at once because it's 4 volumes of manga in the same series, and that is A Bride's Story Volume 8, Volume 9, Volume 10, and Volume 11. The Bride Story is a historical fiction series that takes place in Central Asia, and it follows various women in different areas, and just kind of goes over their day-to-day life, and, some of them are married, and what they do when they're married, and some of them are looking for marriage, and what they're trying to do, and it's just a really sweet series, and the characters are a lot of fun. Did I say it's by Karamori? I don't know if I did, but it's really well drawn by her. Volumes 8 through 9 follow this lady. I can't do names, but she is kind of a gruff exterior. She needs to find a husband, and she has her eyes on a guy, but doesn't really know how to express her feelings very well, so she's trying to get through that issue. Volume 10 mostly follows these two. They're married, and the guy, he's a lot younger than his wife, and he's kind of wants to prove that he's a man, and so he goes off to live a bit with her brothers, who are kind of more out in the wilderness, and learns how to hunt and kind of be more manly, what it means to be a man kind of thing. Volume 11 mostly follows Smith and this lady, and they want to be together, but it's a little bit more complicated of a relationship, and Smith also is trying to set up for an adventure to go through Central Asia again, but there's talk of a war going on, so it's a bit more difficult. They all have different problems going on, but it's still overall pretty chill. The main thing you come here for is the Central Asia land and learning more about them, and also the characters, who I don't think there's any character that I dislike. They're all really good. I love them to bits, so it's a really good series. 11 is currently the final volume in the series. Volume 12 doesn't come out in August, so I have no more to read, and I'm sad. But I did want to read more of this for my 2020 goal, and so, yay. So, just quick update for my 2020 goals. I'm not going to go in depth for my goals, but I'll leave a link to that video. Basically, my 3 big goals were to read 10 non-fantasy novels, finish the r/fantasy book bingo, and I had a whole bunch of series that I wanted to finish or make progress in. So for this month, in non-fantasy, I read Rogue Protocol, so that's a sci-fi. I read Lord of the Flies, which even though I really hated that still counts. I counted that as a horror. I read Hatchet, which is a contemporary. And I read Humble Pie, which is a nonfiction. So for March, I read 4 additional non-fantasy novels, so my total is now 6 out of 10 for that goal. I feel like I'm gonna breeze through this goal. I wasn't really expecting to do that, but I may have miscalculated. But whatever, I can always just read more than 10 non-fantasy books in this year and then make a better goal next year, so. For the r/fantasy bingo goal, it started in April, so I can't use anything that I read in March for this, so no updates here. But at the end of April, I'll be able to use books and update this goal. And for the series that I wanted to read or complete goal, so I read the 2nd book in the Wheel of Time. I forgot how many books are in that series again, but that's 2 out of 14, I think. So, yay, progress in that. I read Equal Rights, which is the 3rd book in the Discworld series. There's a done in Discworld, but again, progress in that. I read Kizumonogatari, the 3rd book in the Monogatari series. I read Rogue Protocol for the Murderbot Diaries, which is the 3rd book. I read 4 volumes of A Bride Story, which completes that, at least for now. Now I'm up to date until August, so I'll count that as complete for now. I'll definitely be reading the 12th volume once that comes out. Whether that's in August or whether that gets delayed, I don't know. But, that's great. And then finally, I read 2 volumes of Higurashi, which also completes that series, and that is 100% done. There's going to be no more for that, so I can definitely check that off. And those are all the goal updates, so back to the video. these are all the books I read in March, plus a bunch of other digital versions of books. Let me know in the comments below if you've read any of these and your thoughts on them. And thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again in another video. Bye! Second book. Ah, you turds! No! I don't like the ambulance. Yeah, please. Go away.
Is it done being a jerk yet?
Almost.